He did nothing when I lost our baby, until the divorce papers made him crumble. The day we lost our baby, my husband went silent. Not the kind of silence that comes when someone doesn't know what to say. It was deeper than that. He simply stopped talking. I remember sitting in the hospital room with my hands folded over the blanket, staring at the empty space where I had expected our child to be. I was 37 then, old enough to understand that life doesn't always give you what you spend years hoping for, but young enough to believe my husband would hold my hand when it happened. His name was David. We had been married for 11 years. We had talked about having a baby for almost as long as we had been married. There had been conversations about names, about the room we would turn into a nursery, about whether the baby would have my eyes or his smile. For months, we had allowed ourselves to imagine a little person running through our house. Then one morning, everything changed. The doctor spoke gently. I remember his face more than his words. I remember looking at David, waiting for him to say something. Anything. He didn't. He sat beside me with his hands clasped between his knees. He looked at the floor. I reached for his hand. He let me hold it, but he didn't squeeze back. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. The silence inside that car was unbearable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted him to tell me that we would get through it. Instead, he turned on the radio. I stared out the window. That was the first moment I felt completely alone. Not because my husband had left me. He was sitting right beside me. But grief can make a room feel empty, even when someone is standing next to you. When we got home, I went into the room we had planned to make into a nursery. There was a small box on the floor. Inside were the first things we had bought. A tiny white blanket, a pair of socks, a stuffed rabbit. I picked up the rabbit and held it against my chest. David stood in the doorway. I waited for him to come closer. He didn't. David, I whispered. He looked at me. I don't know what to do. He nodded. Then he said the words I would remember for years. Neither do I. And he walked away. I don't blame him for not knowing how to fix our grief. Nobody could have fixed it. But I had needed him to grieve with me. Instead, he disappeared into his own silence. And I began to learn something I never expected to learn in my marriage. Sometimes the person you most need during your darkest moment can be standing right beside you and still feel a million miles away. After we came home, I expected David to grieve with me. Instead, he went back to work 2 days later. He shaved. He answered emails. He made coffee in the morning. He asked whether I had paid the electric bill. It was as though our baby had never existed. I knew he was hurting. At least I told myself he was. People grieve differently. That was what everyone kept telling me. So I tried to give him space. I stayed home from work for a while. I didn't want to be around people who would ask how I was doing. How could I explain it? I had lost someone I had never gotten to hold. Someone whose face I had never seen. But I had already loved that child. That love didn't disappear because the pregnancy did. At night, I would lie in bed and stare at the ceiling. David would turn toward the wall. Sometimes I whispered the name we had chosen. We had never officially decided on it. But we had talked about it so many times that it felt real. I called the baby Anna in my mind. David never said the name. Not once. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. One evening, I found him in the garage cleaning his tools. "Can we talk?" I asked. He didn't look up. About what? I stood there for a moment. About the baby. His hands stopped. Then he said, "What is there to talk about?" I felt something inside me collapse. "I don't know, maybe how we're doing." He put down the tool. "I'm trying to move forward." "I am too." "No, you're not." I stared at him. "You still have the blanket in the bedroom." "Yes." "You still talk about it." "Yes." He shook his head. "Then you're not moving forward." I wanted to tell him that moving forward didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. But I couldn't find the words. So I walked away. That night, I put the little white blanket into a box. Not because I was ready to let go. Because I was tired of defending my grief. Months passed. People stopped asking how I was. Friends returned to their normal lives. Family gatherings became uncomfortable. Someone would mention babies, and I would quietly leave the room. David never followed me. He never asked why I had gone. He never asked whether I was okay. Eventually, I stopped expecting him to. That was when something in our marriage began to change. The loss of our baby had not destroyed us all at once. It had created a distance between us. And every time David chose silence, that distance became a little wider. I began to understand that grief wasn't the only thing I was carrying. I was carrying it alone. And loneliness inside a marriage can be more painful than loneliness in an empty house. Because when you're alone in an empty house, you know you're alone. When you're lonely beside the person you love, you keep wondering whether they can see you at all. Years passed, but the silence between David and me never really went away. We learned how to live around it. We went to work. We paid our bills. We attended family gatherings. We smiled for photographs. From the outside, we probably looked like an ordinary married couple. But inside our house, there were two separate lives happening under the same roof. I stopped bringing up the baby. David stopped asking how I felt. We never went back to the room we had once planned as a nursery. Eventually, it became a storage room. Every time I opened that door, I remembered the little white blanket. I kept it in the back of a closet. I couldn't throw it away, but I couldn't look at it either. I hadn't truly healed from it. I had simply become better at hiding it. Years went by. Then one afternoon, my sister called. She had just become a grandmother. She was so happy that I could hear it in her voice. She told me about the baby. The tiny fingers. The crying. The way the baby fell asleep against her daughter's shoulder. I listened. I smiled. I told her how happy I was for them. When the call ended, I sat alone at the kitchen table. I wasn't jealous. I was grieving again. Not only for the baby we had lost, but for the woman I had been before that loss. I realized I had spent years waiting for David to notice that I was still hurting. And he never did. That realization frightened me, because I suddenly understood that we hadn't simply lost a child. We had lost years. Years in which we could have talked. Years in which we could have held each other. Years in which we might have found a way to remember our baby together. Instead, we had both chosen silence. His silence because he didn't know how to face the pain. Mine because I didn't want to force him to. But silence doesn't protect a marriage forever. Sometimes it quietly empties it. One evening, David came home and found me sitting at the kitchen table with the old box in front of me. He stopped in the doorway. "What is that?" I looked at him. "The things we bought for the baby." He stared at the box. I thought you'd thrown those away. I couldn't. He pulled out a chair. For the first time in years, he sat beside me. I think about it sometimes, he said. I looked at him. Then why didn't you ever tell me? He lowered his eyes. I didn't know how. I nodded slowly. Neither did I. We sat there quietly. But this silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was the first honest silence we'd shared in years. I touched the little white blanket. I loved our baby, I said. David swallowed hard. I know. No, I whispered, I don't think you did. He looked at me. I loved that child before we ever knew whether it was a boy or a girl. I needed you to understand that. His eyes filled with tears. I was afraid that if I talked about it, I would fall apart. I looked at him. I was already falling apart. Neither of us spoke. And sitting there, I finally understood what those years had cost us. We hadn't only lost a baby. We had lost the chance to grieve together. And somewhere along the way, we had lost each other too. By the time I finally asked David for a divorce, I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised me. I had imagined that day many times, and in those imaginary conversations, I was always crying or shouting. But when the moment came, I was calm. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten countless dinners, the same table where we had once talked about baby names, the same table where we had once talked about baby names. David was reading something on his phone. I looked at him and said, I want a divorce. He slowly put his phone down. What? I want us to end our marriage. He stared at me. Why? I almost couldn't believe the question. But I answered honestly. Because I've been married to you for years, and I've been grieving alone for years. He looked away. I thought we were doing better. We were functioning. I paused. That isn't the same thing. He rubbed his hands together. Is this because of the baby? It started there. He looked at me. But it's not only about that anymore. I told him what I had finally understood. I had spent years waiting for him to notice my pain, waiting for him to ask about the blanket, waiting for him to say our baby's name, waiting for him to acknowledge that the loss had changed me. And while I waited, our marriage became quieter and quieter. David's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know you felt that way. I gave him a sad smile. I tried to tell you. You stopped talking about it. Because you stopped listening. He lowered his head. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I had never heard him say before. I was afraid. I looked at him. Of what? Of feeling it. He swallowed. I thought if I kept working, kept moving, kept everything normal, eventually it wouldn't hurt so much. I nodded. I understand that now. But I didn't understand what it was doing to you. That was the first time David admitted it. His silence had not protected him. It had left me alone. And his silence had slowly taken our marriage with it. I don't hate you, I said. I know. I don't even want to punish you. He looked at me. Then why divorce me? Because forgiveness doesn't always mean staying. He closed his eyes. That sentence seemed to reach him. The next morning, the divorce papers arrived. David stared at the envelope on the kitchen counter. He didn't open it. He just stood there with his hand resting on it. Then he began to cry. Not quietly, not the way he had cried years earlier when he thought I wasn't looking. He sat down and covered his face. "I should have been there," he said. I stood across from him. "Yes, I should have held you. Yes, I should have grieved with you." I nodded. "Yes, you should have." For years, I had wanted him to say those words. But hearing them now didn't change what had happened. It only confirmed what I already knew. Sometimes a person realizes what they had only after they're finally forced to face what they are about to lose. And by then, the other person may already have learned how to live without them. The divorce papers made David crumble, but by then, I had already learned how to let go. Not just of my marriage, of the life I had spent waiting for him to become the husband I needed. We didn't fight during the divorce. There were no dramatic arguments. We simply divided our belongings, signed the papers, and slowly separated the life we had built together. Before I left the house, I went into the old storage room. The little white blanket was still there. I held it for a moment. For years, I had thought keeping it meant I was holding on to our baby. But I finally understood that I wasn't. My child would always be part of my story, whether I kept that blanket or not. I folded it carefully and placed it in a small box. Then I left it behind. Not because the memory didn't matter. Because it did. I just didn't need an object to prove that I had loved my baby. David stood by the front door when I left. "I am sorry," he said. I looked at him. "I know. I wish I could change it." "So do I." He started to cry again. I reached for his hand. Not as his wife, as someone who had once loved him deeply. "I hope you learn to talk about what hurts you," I said. "Don't make someone else spend years guessing what you're feeling." He nodded. I walked outside. The morning air was cool. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. I didn't feel happy about the divorce. There was no happiness in losing 11 years of marriage. But there was relief in no longer waiting. I had spent years believing that letting go meant forgetting. It doesn't. Sometimes letting go simply means accepting that the past cannot become what you wished it had been. I still remember our baby. I still wonder who that child might have become. And sometimes, even now, I take out an old photograph from that time and sit quietly for a while. But I no longer grieve alone. I have learned to speak. I have learned to ask for comfort. And I have learned that love, no matter how deep, cannot survive forever on silence. David's silence changed our marriage. But it did not have to decide the rest of my life. I lost a child. Then slowly, I lost a marriage. But somewhere along the way, I found my voice again. And that was the part of myself I refused to lose. I refused to lose.